I recently relocated to San Francisco, and let me tell you, it's been a wild ride. I'm currently in this odd limbo, bouncing between apartments while piecing together freelance video editing jobs. The gigs aren't glamorous, but they keep some cash flowing, enough to cover rent if I actually had a place to call home. San Francisco's wallet draining, so I've been crashing wherever I can until I find something affordable. That's how I ended up shacking up with Liam, a guy I met through one of my clients. He's a solid dude, 22 years old, studying architecture and shredding the guitar like he's auditioning for a rock band. Terrible skills, but the guy's got gusto. We weren't super tight, just new buddies who clicked fast. When I mentioned I was stuck between leases, he just gave a casual shrug and said, "You can bunk at my place for a bit. My mom won't mind." And that's how this whole thing kicked off. It was supposed to be a short stay, just a couple of nights. That first night was chill and laid back. Liam introduced me to his mom, Sarah, who looked way younger than I'd pictured. Maybe early 40s, but she could easily pass for someone in her mid-30s. She's slim, carries herself with this quiet confidence, and has a way of locking eyes with you when she speaks. She greeted me like we'd known each other forever, offered me some dinner, and teased that I seemed a bit old to be pawing around with her son. We shared a meal, watched a flick, and chatted about my video editing hustle. She peppered me with questions, but it didn't feel like prying. She genuinely seemed interested in my story. I sacked out on the couch that night, feeling grateful. It's rare to meet someone's mom and instantly feel at ease. The next morning, though, something changed. I dragged myself out of sleep around 6:45 a.m., the house quiet as a ghost town. Still groggy, I shuffled to the kitchen for a glass of water. That's when I spotted Sarah by the sink, barefoot, her hair still wet like she just hopped out of the shower. She had on a silky navy robe, loosely knotted at the waist. Not super revealing, but enough to spark a few thoughts. She glanced my way and flashed a gentle smile. "Hey, morning," she said, grabbing a mug. "Morning," I mumbled back, trying to sound more awake than I was while definitely avoiding staring. She poured herself some coffee and leaned against the counter. "You sleep all right?" she asked. "Yeah, the couch was surprisingly comfy," I said, forcing a casual tone. I busied myself opening the fridge, mostly to avoid her gaze, but my pulse was racing a bit too much for my liking. When I snuck a glance back, she was looking right at me. Not in a weird way, just steady and focused. Then she tilted her head slightly and said, "Is that how you always look at me?" I froze like a deer in headlights. Her faint smile didn't hide the seriousness in her eyes. She wasn't messing around. My face got hot. I hadn't meant to gawk. She sipped her coffee, still holding my stare, not saying she was bothered, just waiting. I stood there, awkward as hell, unsure how to respond. Before I could cobble together a reply, Liam strolled in, yawning. "Yo, any coffee left?" he muttered, scratching his face. Just like that, the tension broke. Sarah turned back to the counter, cool as ever, and said, "Just brewed some." I grabbed my water, plopped down at the table, and acted like everything was normal, even though my head was spinning. The rest of the day was pretty relaxed. Liam and I hung out, played some video games, took a walk, and shot the breeze about random stuff. Sarah acted like nothing had happened. Friendly, polite, same as the night before. But every time my eyes wandered her way, I caught her glancing back. That night, sprawled on the couch, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't stop replaying her words. "Is that how you always look at me?" It wasn't playful. There was a weight to her tone, like she was expecting a real answer I didn't give. The next morning, Liam had an early architecture class. He bounced out around 7:30 a.m., tossing his keys on the counter and saying he'd be back by noon. So there I was, mostly alone. I parked myself on the couch with my laptop, half working on a wedding video for a client in Cleveland, half scrolling TikTok, my focus totally fried. My mind kept drifting back to the kitchen, to Sarah's voice, to that look she gave me. Around 8:45 a.m., I heard footsteps on the stairs. I glanced up. It was Sarah. She was rocking tight black leggings and an old sweatshirt, hair tossed up in a messy bun. No makeup, and somehow she looked even better than the day before. Effortless, authentic. Hey, morning, she said with a warm smile. Morning, I shot back. She wandered into the kitchen, poured some coffee, and asked if I'd eaten. I hadn't. She offered to whip up some toast and eggs. I hesitated but said, sure, sounds good. We sat at the dining table, just the two of us, eating breakfast. At first, we kept it light, talking about my editing gigs, how long I've been at it, whether I ever dreamed of making it big in Hollywood. Then her questions got a bit more personal. You got a girlfriend back in Ohio? She asked. Nah, I said, chewing slowly. Had one, but it fell apart. She nodded like she understood. Then she said, you don't seem like the type someone just walks away from. I let out an awkward chuckle. Trust me, I'm not that special. She locked eyes with me and said, I think you might be. Silence hung between us for a second. I looked away first. She didn't push it, just switched gears and asked if I could help move some boxes in the garage. Just old junk I've been meaning to donate, she said casually. I nodded. Yeah, I can help. 15 minutes later, we were in the garage, tackling a pile of dusty boxes. We took our time not because the boxes were heavy, but because the space was cramped. We kept brushing past each other in the tight quarters, and every time it felt close. Too close. At one point, she dropped a small box of books and bent down to grab it. I looked away quick, but not before catching the way her body moved, the smooth curve of her back, the quiet confidence in every motion. When she stood up, our eyes met. There's that look again, she said softly, no trace of a joke. I opened my mouth to say something, but every word felt either lame or too raw. I'm not judging, she said, stepping closer. I just want to know what's going through your mind. I don't know if I should say, I admitted, managing a half smile. Because of Liam. She nodded slightly. That's a fair answer. Then she reached out, slowly brushed some dust off my shoulder, and walked past me toward the door like it was nothing. I stood there, pretending to organize some books, but my hands were shaking. Liam got back that afternoon and wanted to show me some architecture designs on his laptop. We kicked back in the living room. Sarah passed by a few times, quiet and casual. Nothing was said, but I kept feeling her eyes on me from the hallway from the kitchen. Dinner was weird, or maybe it was just me. She made pasta and we all sat at the table. Liam carried the conversation, rambling about school. Sarah laughed at the right moments, tossed in a few comments, but barely looked my way, which somehow made it worse. After dinner, Liam asked if I wanted to hit up a friend's party. I said I had work to finish. He didn't argue, just shrugged and left around 8:30 p.m. I went back to the couch, fired up my laptop, and tried to focus on editing. About 20 minutes later, Sarah walked through the living room holding a glass of red wine. I'll be in the den if you need me, she said, not slowing down. Cool, thanks, I said, giving a quick nod. A few minutes passed and I caught the faint sound of jazz drifting from the back of the house. I tried to keep my focus on editing, but my concentration was shot. Eventually, I just gave up, though I couldn't quite pinpoint why. I got up, took a few slow steps toward the hallway and hesitated for a second. Then I made my way to the den. The door was slightly ajar. Sarah was curled up on the couch, legs tucked beneath her, skimming through a book. She glanced up when I appeared. Finished with work? She asked. Not exactly, I admitted. She tilted her head, eyeing me for a moment. So what's got you wandering in here? I fumbled for an answer. Just needed to clear my head for a bit. She set her book down on the coffee table. From editing videos, she said, or from trying not to stare at me? My throat tightened, words nowhere to be found. She gave a soft smile, easing the tension. Chill, I'm not gonna pounce on you. I let out a shaky laugh. This whole thing's just unexpected. Tell me about it, she murmured. Then she glanced down the hall and added, if you're curious, Liam's probably out for the night. I really looked at her then, taking her in. She spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. You can sit down if you want. So I did. We sat there side by side, probably for 20 minutes, maybe more. Words were scarce between us. She flipped through her book like she was reading, and I acted like I didn't notice how close our legs were. Every so often, our knees brushed and neither of us pulled away. The jazz played softly in the background, smooth and unhurried. She took a sip of her wine and then offered me the glass. Want a taste? She asked. I paused for a second. Yeah, sure. She handed it over like it was no big deal. I took a quick sip and passed it back. Pretty good, I said, just trying to fill the quiet. She smiled. Italian wine pairs best with good company and a little silence. I nodded, my heart pounding louder than the music. I kept stealing glances at her, the way her sweatshirt slid off one shoulder, the slight curve of her lips when she caught me looking. It felt like I'd stumbled into someone else's life, someone braver, someone who didn't overthink everything. Then, without looking my way, she said, "Ever wonder what happens if you step over a line you know you shouldn't cross?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, I have." She finally turned to face me. "Could you live with yourself if you did?" I met her gaze. "Depends," I said, "on what's waiting on the other side of that line." Her eyes held mine for a few seconds, searching for the truth I wasn't saying out loud. Then she stood up, grabbed her wine, and said I should probably get some rest. I nodded. "Yeah, probably smart." She walked to the door, paused, and looked back. "Night, Ethan." "Good night," I replied. She slipped into the hallway and headed upstairs. I lingered on the couch, trying to steady my breathing. Eventually, I dragged myself back to the living room, opened my laptop, but didn't touch a single key. I just sat there, staring at a blank screen. Around 11:45 p.m., I got up to use the bathroom. As I walked down the hall, something caught my eye. Her bedroom door was slightly open, a soft glow spilling out through the crack. I kept moving, but halfway to the bathroom, I heard it. "Ethan." It was a whisper, so faint I almost missed it. I stopped and turned. Sarah was just behind the door, barely visible through the narrow gap. She didn't open it wider, didn't invite me in, just said, "You're still awake." "Couldn't sleep," I admitted. She nodded slowly. Then, in an even softer voice, she said, "I've been thinking about earlier." "Me too," I said. There was a pause. Her voice dropped lower. "Come here for a sec." My heart was hammering as I stepped toward her. When I reached the door, I hesitated. She opened it just enough for me to slip inside. Her room was dimly lit, just a bedside lamp casting a warm glow. She was in a loose gray t-shirt that hit mid-thigh, no makeup, no pretense, just her, real and close. She sat on the edge of the bed, legs crossed, holding a glass of water. "This isn't something I do," she said quietly. I stayed where I was. "I'm not some restless mom chasing excitement. I'm not trying to turn your world upside down or mine." "I get it," I said. She took a deep breath. "It's just, I can't remember the last time someone really saw me. Then you showed up and suddenly I feel like I exist again." I stepped closer. "You're more than seen," I said. She looked up, her eyes glistening. "Don't say that unless you mean it." "I mean it." Then it happened. She reached out, gently pulled me toward her, and our lips met, soft, tentative, trembling. It wasn't rushed or wild. It was everything we hadn't dared to say, spilling out in that moment. We kissed for what felt like an eternity. Then she leaned back and closed the door behind me. I did the same. The rest of the night moved like a dream, quiet touches, whispered words, long pauses filled with nerves, desire, and something that felt too much like a real connection. At one point, lying beside her in the dark, I whispered, "What the hell are we doing?" She replied softly, "Something we'll probably regret. But not right now." She shook her head. "Not tonight." By morning, I was up early and slipped out of her room before Liam could stir. He was still knocked out. I went for a walk, trying to shake the heaviness in my chest. Everything felt different, weightier, but also more vivid, more alive. When I got back, Sarah was in the kitchen, flipping pancakes like it was just another day. "Morning," she said with an easy smile. "Morning." Liam bounded in right behind me, clapping my shoulder. "Hope you slept, man. Mom's pancakes are the stuff of legends." I sat down and Sarah slid a plate in front of me, her smile the same as it was 3 days ago. But now I knew what it hid. That smile was ours, a quiet secret just between us. Thursday morning came in soft and quiet. Liam was rushing around, packing for a weekend trip he'd mentioned earlier, a getaway with his college buddies in Austin. At the time, it hadn't hit me, but now every moment of him getting ready felt loaded. "Sure you don't want to tag along?" he asked, stuffing socks into his bag. "There's room and you could edit by the pool." I shook my head. "Got a deadline Sunday," I lied. "Can't risk falling behind." "Cool, cool," he said. "Just don't set the house on fire while I'm gone." He took off a little after 1 p.m. Sarah was upstairs when he yelled goodbye. She didn't come down. The front door shut and silence settled in. Then I heard slow, deliberate footsteps coming down the stairs. I looked up from the couch. Sarah appeared, wearing loose jeans and a soft tank top, holding a laundry basket like it was a normal day. But it wasn't. "He gone?" she asked, not quite meeting my eyes. "Yeah," I said. She nodded slightly and moved past the living room toward the hallway. A minute later, I heard water running in the kitchen. I followed the sound. She was at the sink rinsing strawberries. "Want some?" she asked, glancing at me sideways. I stepped closer. "Do you?" She didn't answer right away, just turned off the tap, set the bowl down, and finally looked at me. The air between us wasn't light anymore, it carried a sharpness, a weight. "I didn't get much sleep last night," she said quietly. "Same here," I admitted. She dried her hands and leaned against the counter. "Are we making a mistake?" I asked. Probably, she said. But I'm not ready to back out. I moved toward her, slow and purposeful. She didn't pull away. When I was close enough to touch, she looked up. We've only got 2 days, she whispered. And that was all it took. That afternoon, we stayed indoors, 2 people hyper-aware that our time was slipping away. There was no pretending, no games, no guilt creeping in, at least not yet. She whipped up some food and I pitched in, both of us cracking jokes like it was the most natural thing. In the kitchen, our kisses started slow, cautious, then deepened like we'd been bottling it up for weeks. By the time evening rolled around, we were tangled up on the couch, a movie playing that neither of us gave a damn about. Her legs were slung across mine, her head nestled against my chest. Every so often, she'd look up, her smile saying more than words could. She didn't ask me to stay in her room that night, she didn't need to. The house was still, no jazz, no charged whispers, just the warmth of our skin, the rhythm of our breathing, and a quiet that spoke louder than anything else. In the dark, we talked softly about her life, mine, and how something could feel so right and so messed up all at once. It's been forever since I felt like a woman, she confessed. I didn't have some slick reply, I just pulled her closer. Waking up the next morning felt like stepping into a dream that hadn't ended. We ate breakfast out on the porch, her in one of my shirts, half-buttoned, hanging long. You'd never guess the weight of what we were to each other just by looking at us. Later, we ran errands, grabbing groceries, picking up random stuff, and it all felt strangely ordinary. But every store aisle, every quick glance carried that same electric undercurrent, like we both knew this wasn't forever, but it was real for now. Back home, she played some old tunes she loved, and we danced in the kitchen, laughing like we hadn't just complicated everything. She pulled out photo albums, showing me snapshots of her younger days, baby pictures of Liam. Then her mood shifted, grew quiet. You seem down, I said. I'm not, she said softly. Just realizing this has an expiration date. Her voice was gentle, heavy. Yeah, I know, I murmured back. She reached out, her fingers grazing my cheek lightly. I wish it didn't. That evening, we sat out back under the string lights Liam had put up last summer. The night was warm, the air soft. She leaned her head on my shoulder and asked me to tell her about my childhood. So I rambled on, and she listened like it was the only story that mattered. Around 11:30 p.m., she whispered, if life had dealt us different cards. I nodded. Yeah, I get it. Then Saturday morning hit like a punch. Liam texted her around 8:30 a.m. saying he'd be back by late afternoon with his buddies. We both stared at her phone, silent, letting the reality sink in. Then Sarah got up from the table. Guess we should tidy up. We moved through the house quietly. She did laundry, I vacuumed. Every now and then we'd pass each other, sharing a fleeting glance or a brush of hands, but the kisses and heavy words from the night before were gone. We both felt the end closing in. Before Liam got back, I packed my stuff and told him I'd found a short-term rental on Craigslist, not a complete lie. You sure, man? He asked. Yeah, I said. Time to stop mooching off your mom. He chuckled. I think she liked you being around. I didn't say anything back. Just before I left, Sarah caught me in the hallway by the front door while Liam was upstairs grabbing something. She stepped close. This isn't the end, she said. Feels like it, I replied. Her throat tightened like she was holding something back. You're a good guy, Ethan. I wanted to kiss her, hold her, say something to tie it all up, but I couldn't. I just nodded. Thanks for everything. Her eyes held mine, the kind of look that sticks with you forever. Then Liam came bounding down the stairs and whatever we had slipped away. For weeks dragged by after I left their place. Time crawled. I rented a room in a shared house not far from them, not intentional, but close enough that I'd sometimes pass their street while running errands, trying to clear my mind. I hadn't seen Sarah since that moment in the hallway. No texts, no calls, nothing. I didn't expect her to reach out, and honestly, I wasn't sure what I'd say if she did. So I threw myself into work, editing videos from dawn till midnight, thinking it'd drown out her voice in my head. It didn't. Everything brought her back, a song, a scent, even a chipped coffee mug that looked like hers. Then one evening, Liam texted me. Yo, Mom said you forgot your charger here. Wanna come grab it? I stared at the message too long. Thing is, I didn't remember leaving a charger. Maybe I didn't. Maybe it was an excuse. Yeah, I can stop by tomorrow, I texted back. Sweet. I'm in class till 3 p.m., Liam replied, but Mom'll be there. Of course she would. The next day, I stood outside their door, my heart pounding like I was stepping back into a memory I wasn't ready for. I knocked. Sarah answered. For a split second, she looked caught off guard, then her face softened, calm and collected. Hey, she said, come on in. I stepped inside and it was like time hadn't moved, same look, same smell. She walked to the kitchen counter and picked up a charger. This yours? She asked. I nodded. The silence between us carried everything we couldn't say. "How you holding up?" she asked. "Doing okay. Been buried in work," I said. She gave a small, knowing smile. "Liam mentioned you've been busy. What about you?" I asked. "I'm managing," she said. There was a pause. I glanced at the charger in her hand. "So," I said, "was this really here, or?" She met my eyes. I didn't want it to end like it did. I let out a breath. Neither did I. We stood there, the silence stretching longer than it should have. "I've been thinking about those few days," she said softly. I looked up. "You regret it?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I regret how much I want it to happen again." That hit like a freight train. "But we can't," she added. "Not really." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know." Her voice steadied. "It was never meant to last. We were just two people who needed each other for a moment." "Maybe," I said, "but it was more than that." Her face softened. "No, it wasn't just that." I stepped closer. "So this is really the end?" She gave a faint smile. "Yeah, it is." I reached into my pocket, feeling the folded note I'd written for her but hadn't planned to give. "I wrote something for you," I said, "but I think I'll keep it." Then she surprised me, not with a kiss, but with a hug, the kind that feels like it's holding everything together. I held her back. "I hope you find someone who makes you feel the way you deserve," I said. She pulled away, her eyes glistening. "You already did that," she said, "even if it was just for a little while." I nodded. "Goodbye, Sarah." "Goodbye, Ethan," she said. I turned and walked to the door, stepping outside. I glanced back one last time. She stood under the kitchen light, arms wrapped around herself like she was keeping it all together. I didn't say anything else, just closed the door softly behind me. That night, alone in my new place, I lay staring at the ceiling. No dramatic farewell, no chasing each other, no cinematic kiss in the rain, just a quiet close to something that wasn't built to last. A memory I knew would stick with me longer than it should. But maybe that's the point. Some stories don't need a second chapter. That's what makes them unforgettable.